Good morning. How about a little car talk to start this vlog off? It is mid-month book bash. It is it is June the 9th, and this is Friday, and it's a work day for me, so I'm headed off to go to my office and grab my vehicle and head off into the field. It is raining again for I think this is the 7th day in a row, so yeah, it's pretty waterlogged where I live, but I am trying to be thankful because I do live in the northeast part of the US, and we have been spared the smoke from the Canadian wildfires that the mid-Atlantic region of the US has been experiencing because of this low pressure system that has kept rain on our heads for the last week. So I'm trying to be thankful about it. But anyway, we are doing mid-month book bash this weekend. I am in the car for a while this morning, so I am going to be listening to a book that I have to read for the BookTube Prize. My name is Floyd, and I am about 100 pages into that one so far, and it's going well. So I'm going to continue to try to make progress with that. I will give you an update later on today with the other books that I'm currently reading, which is quite a stack of books because I've been into a bunch of books but not able to really read for like big chunks of time, so I'm not getting much finished. So that's what this mid-month book bash is going to be about. Is going to be about cleaning up some stuff that's currently on my reading list that I'm hoping to finish up over the next 4 days. So let's see how I do. Hello, I thought I would check in on Friday afternoon. Work is done for the day, and just give a little rundown of what I'm currently reading. So I did listen to His Name is George Floyd in the car today on audiobook, and I am on page 182 of this one that I'm reading for the BookTube Prize semifinals round. So that's all I can say about that. The big push that I'm going to be making the rest of this afternoon is to finish The Revolutionary, which is by Stacy Schiff, and I'm reading it on my Kindle. This is a buddy read with Britta Bowler, and we are reading the last 4 chapters for check-in either Sunday or Monday. So I have been reading this for about a week or so and really enjoying it. This is the biography basically of Samuel Adams, who was, of course, one of the founding fathers of the United States and was very instrumental in everything leading up to the Revolutionary War. And Stacy Schiff has taken another sort of famous figure who we don't have a lot of primary documentation for. We have his public writings that were published in newspapers and things like that, but all of his personal papers he destroyed because he didn't want any incriminating evidence lying around, I guess. So this is telling the story of what Samuel Adams got up to in the sort of the mid to late 1700s, from like 1765 or so up through the Revolutionary War period. Currently in the book, we're on like 1771, 72 era. And this details Adams' involvement in things like the Stamp Act and the Boston Massacre and things like that. Samuel Adams was sort of a late bloomer. He, for the first 40 years of his life, didn't really distinguish himself. And of course, his more well-known cousin, John Adams, who was younger than him, was sort of setting himself up as this, famous lawyer and was quite active. Samuel Adams, in his 40s, became very much involved in trying to bring people together to support the cause of less government interference from England. And that led into thinking about independence and liberty and freedom and all those sorts of ideals. And he used his power in writing and persuasion to sort of convince people to go along with what he wanted to do. So that's what Stacy Schiff is writing about. And she, of course, is a very good writer. I loved her book, Cleopatra, and I've read several of her other nonfiction works about other famous people. And she does have a very good storytelling style. I will say that there are parts of this book where I feel she gets too much into the weeds about the back and forths between the folks that Samuel Adams was leading, the Revolutionaries, and the Loyalists, the people who were in charge in Boston at the time, who had been appointed by the king and Parliament to sort of run things, like the governor and other officiants in Massachusetts colony at the time. And sometimes it gets a little bit too detailed for me in that sort of aspect, but lots to think about with this book, about how we frame people who are protesting government, and the words that we use to describe people, and how that impacts how they're viewed by the rest of the world. So yeah, lots to think about here. And I'm hoping to finish that one up, like I said, for Sunday check-in. This book I've been reading for a couple weeks. This is Woodsqueer, Crafting a Sustainable Rural Life by Gretchen Kegler. This, again, is nonfiction. It was on my Springathon TBR, and I did not get to it, but I am reading it now for Pride Month because Gretchen Kegler is lesbian, and she is telling her story of herself and her partner, her wife, living in the wilderness in Maine and trying to craft a life, sort of farming. She was, Gretchen Kegler was a professor at a local college, but she and her partner also ran this farm and basically grew all their own food and raised animals and tried to live a very sustainable rural lifestyle. So there's all of the stuff about, each chapter is sort of an essay contained within itself about one topic, whether that's about raising goats or growing a vegetable garden, or what it's like to have to prepare your wood pile every year to heat your home with. But also getting into her relationship with her wife, the troubles that they had, Legler's own troubled past. She had a very difficult childhood, and her trying to deal with her own baggage, basically, and also be a loving partner to her wife. This is a quiet, charming book. This is not a fast-paced book by any means. This is just gentle and lovely, and but very slow paced. So if that's something that sounds good to you, I think this would be a good choice. Another couple of nonfiction books that I'm working on. This book right here, I just picked up. I just got it in the mail, and I just started reading it. I'm like 50 pages into it. This is No Hard Feelings, The Secret Power of Embracing Emotions at Work by Liz Fosseline and Molly West Duffy. I heard about this book on the Book Riot podcast, and it was on one of their recommendation shows where I think somebody was looking for books to deal with a difficult workplace environment, and this was one that was recommended. My workplace has been very uneven for the last 6 months or so. We've had a lot of restructuring, new employees coming on, old employees leaving, and there's been a lot of upheaval, and it's been very stressful and very hard to deal with at times. And so I just felt like sometimes it's good to read a book and just sort of touch back on topics that you already know, but sometimes it's good to have a refresher on those things. So, and this book is set up, it's very readable, it's very conversational in style, and it has all these awesome illustrations to, it has little cartoons to illustrate points and illustrations, and so it just makes it a fun book to read and very easy to read. So yeah, I'm enjoying that one. I'll be dipping in and out of this during the weekend as well. And then last but not least, I am reading, actually I have two more books to tell you about. One of them is this one. This is the next presidential biography that I'm working on. This is Wilson by A. Scott Berg. Obviously, biography of Woodrow Wilson, very chunky one, over 800 pages. Woodrow Wilson is the next president that I have to read in my chronological reading of presidential biographies. I've read the first 3 chapters so far, and I am on page 75. So I don't know how much I'll get read in this one, but I am working on it, and it is a library copy, so I do need to continue to make progress on it. And then last, actually for real last, I'm reading The Bandit Queens. Let me see if I can bring it up here on my Kindle. So The Bandit Queens is a book that's been talked about a lot on BookTube recently because it is It was on the Women's Prize for Fiction. It was listed as on the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And then a bunch of people read it that I watch on BookTube, including Britta Bowler, and they really enjoyed it. So I picked it up. It was like for a really cheap price on Kindle. So I picked it up and I started actually reading this one on the plane back from Europe a couple weeks ago, and I read like 20% of it. And then that first week back after vacation was like crazy, and I didn't get a chance to pick it up at all. And then I picked it up again about a week ago and started reading it, and I'm just loving it. It is so good. I heard it described as sort of like a very in the vein of My Sister the Serial Killer, and I would agree with that. It's in that vein. It's very feminist and very funny, and it's just, there's been a lot of developments in the story that I did not expect. So basically the plot, the premise behind this is that a woman's husband disappears and everybody in her community assumes that she killed him, and then other women in the community start coming to her for help in killing their husbands. And so it just goes from there. And there's been lots of twists and turns, and very funny and amusing to read, and just a really great story. So I will be continuing on with this one as well. So that is a lot of things to be reading all at once. And that is why I said this weekend for Mid-Month Book Bash is going to be a clean up and catch up for me with my books. So let's see if I can get anything accomplished. Hey friends, happy Sunday. It is Sunday morning of Mid-Month Book Bash, and I am here to report that I finished The Revolutionaries by Stacy Schiff last night. So this is a nonfiction book. I spoke about it briefly when I introduced all the books that I am reading currently. So I won't go into what the book's about as much right now, but just the last 100 pages that I read last night. This book overall, I would say, was a good book for me. Not great. It did not reach the heights that Cleopatra reached for me. I loved Cleopatra, and I thought that one was just truly excellent nonfiction biography of a person that we really don't know a whole lot about because there aren't many primary sources. And we similarly don't know much about Samuel Adams' private thoughts because he destroyed all of his letters, or his friends destroyed them for him. So there's a lot of questions about his motivations, what his end goal was in his sort of promotion of freedom and liberty at the time of the Revolutionary War period in America. So I liked the book, but I thought that there were parts in the middle that were less interesting, that sort of dragged and felt less pertinent to the story she was trying to tell. But the last 100 pages I really liked. I thought it was a really interesting look at a person who, the first 40 years of their life, they really didn't do too much, and then they were super important historically to a movement in the mid part of their life, and then the last part of his life, he again sort of faded. He didn't really fade into obscurity. That's not the right way to put it, but he certainly became less prominent in the government and in the sort of movement of the country as it went from winning the revolution and forming its, the initial organization of the U.S. government, because he was like the first true libertarian. He was a small government against centralized federal government. He really felt that the people should be the ones that were making the decisions, and that everything should devolve to the lowest level of decision making. So town meeting level, people getting together and coming to consensus, making compromises, all of that stuff. That was where his passion lied. And so this book overall just made me really think a lot about how we frame protests, how we look at revolutions, who comes off as the good guy, who comes off as the bad guy, how people are viewed in history, and like the importance of sort of writing your own narrative if you want to be seen in a certain light by history. And Sam Adams was not interested in sort of glorifying himself, that he was very much against personal glorification, and he had a lot of problems with some of the individual founding fathers and how they sort of handled themselves after the revolution, and how they sort of promoted themselves and wanted to be celebrities and, you know, really seen as these larger than life figures. Sam Adams never was about that. So he was a very, very interesting person. And I'm really glad that I read this book. Of course, buddy reading it with Britta was awesome because we always have excellent conversations when we read, and so this was no exception this time around with The Revolutionary. So I would say it's a book that if you're interested in history, if you like that sort of thing, if you read presidential biographies or history nonfiction, this is probably a book you'll find interesting. If you're not interested in American history, you're gonna probably struggle with the level of detail in this one. So that's my review of that. So we are headed off to our camp to do some maintenance type stuff, mowing of lawns and planting of flowers and that sort of thing. And we'll see. I probably will start listening to a new audiobook while we do that, but I'm not sure what else I will end up getting to pick up today. Hey everyone, let's close out this mid-month book bash reading vlog. It is Monday evening and I have completed another book. I finished Woodsqueer, Crafting a Sustainable Rural Life by Gretchen Kegler. This is a memoir and I read it for Pride Month. And I really enjoyed this. This is about 280 pages. Like I said, memoir, and it's really written in essay form. So each chapter is like a standalone essay. Talking about things like, her partner and she purchased this house out in rural Maine, in Western Maine, and they start a farm and they try to raise their own food and they have animals like chickens and goats and things like that. And, talks about that sort of aspect of having a sustainable rural lifestyle. And that's interspersed with chapters about, Gretchen's, basically her relationship with her partner. They end up getting married, but before that they have a lot of relationship difficulties. Kegler is, she has family issues from her childhood that she's trying to deal with, and there's some essays about that in there. There is sections that just talk about Maine in general and what it's like to be a queer person living in rural Maine, which I thought were really interesting chapters for me as a person who lives in Maine myself. She's Gretchen Kegler and her partner have been living in Maine for, at this point, over a decade. So they've had a lot of experience and sort of have seen the evolution of the sort of political will in this state about gay rights and same-sex marriage and that all that sort of stuff. So that evolution has occurred since she's been living in Maine. She's not from Maine originally, and neither has her partner. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I think this is a very slow-paced, quiet, contemplative, how do you say that word? Anyway, this is a book that just causes you to ruminate on issues and to think about things like your relationship with your food and what it would be like to, you know, try to grow all your own vegetables and survive with that and all these sorts of things. So I did enjoy this. I will say that it's not, you know, don't go into this expecting like a really fast pace, you know, keep you turning the pages type of read, because that's not what this is, but it's enjoyable in its own way. I have also read in several of the books that I had on the go that I talked about on Friday, but haven't really made any significant progress in those. I did, however, start 2 new books. So I started on my Kindle, Happy Place by Emily Henry, which is her latest, sorry for the glare, trying to get this, is her latest romance novel. I'm just going to put this down now because that's just glaring and it's annoying. I'm reading that with my romance buddy readers, Doris and Katie, and I've read the first 65 pages today in that, and I'm really enjoying it so far because it takes place in Maine. Again, another book that takes place in Maine. So there's a friendship group that's been coming to a summer cottage on the coast of Maine since they were in college, and they've all arrived for you know, their annual summer vacation, and some big events are taking place. So yeah, so far very enjoyable dialogue, really enjoyable place setting, and just a fun read so far. And then I also started a new audiobook, The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, I think is the name of it. I will put a picture up here. And this is by Shannon Chakraborty. I read her City of Brass trilogy a few years ago and really enjoyed that. And I am buddy reading this one with Doris, and because we both really like the author. We're both listening to it on audiobook, and it is a fantastic audiobook. The narrator really, it's like there's a lot of acting going into the actual narration. So it's fantastic. It's all about this lady pirate, middle-aged lady pirate who's been in retirement and has been coerced to come out of retirement to go on one last adventure and make a whole bunch of money, potentially. She's getting her gang back together again. She's getting her old crew back together again to go try to complete this quest, and hopefully will give her financial stability to raise her daughter and support her family. So it's very feminist, and it's like turning all the tropes on its head about pirate stories, fantasy pirate stories. Takes place in the 1200s, I think, in this fantasy sort of Middle Eastern type world. So super, super fun so far. Really enjoying the audiobook. Highly, highly recommend the audiobook. I'm about 28% of the way into that one. So I feel pretty accomplished for this mid-month book bash. I think I completed 2 books, right? I think I've completed 2 books and started a bunch more. And yeah, I feel like I made progress in several of the books that I had on the go when I started on Friday. So that feels really good. I hope you all have had some good luck reading this past weekend. I'd love to hear what you've been reading, what you've been working on. Yeah, and just let me know all about it in the comments below, and I will talk to you later.